You have new questions
Okay.
for us, right?
Yes.
All right, let's hear.
Should I begin?
These are questions about Brhat
Okay,
Parashara
so
Hora Shastra. We're going
we're
to
still on.
continue. Yeah, continue. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay, so we're still in chapter 3, and this is section 3.8. And the translation says, the vastness of time and space is reflected in the astronomical observation and calculation of, can you pronounce that word for me?
Drik Ganita.
Drikagnita?
Drik Ganita.
Drik Ganita.
Right.
Drik Ganita. The position of the sun, moon. Pardon?
Right. Is my sound okay?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I just saw a thing says unstable internet connection, so I was just checking. Okay, so, and it says the position of the sun, moon, and the planets for any given time are determined from it. So I wanted to know if you can translate that word first,
Sure.
just to see if my question is relevant.
Okay. Drik, Sanskrit word, drik means optics. Optical.
Okay.
So like, it's the same word as darshan, drishti.
Okay.
All those words are based on the same root, which means to see.
To see, okay.
And then ganita means to count. So it's a word for math.
Okay.
So it's like the science of observation. Drik ganita is like scientific observation, careful observation, mathematical observation, a combination of math and visual confirmation. So basically the word drik ganita means careful observation, scientific observation. But it also implies that you have to do math, but you also have to use your eye. You follow me?
Yes.
Okay. So when you do mathematics, remember this is from an old book, right? This is Parashara Hora Shastra. It's probably now referring back to Siddhantas. This sloka is probably referring back to Siddhantas, which are older books about the Drik Ganita. How do you do scientific observations? So in those days, even today to some small extent, but in those days especially, math was not exact. The mathematical formulas were not exactly fine-tuned. So you have to do observation. You have to do ganita and drik at the same time. You have to do your calculations, and then you have to do drik. You have to do an observation to see if your calculation is right. And then you can improve your calculations so that they match the drik, so that they match the observation. That's how, over time, the calculations got to be so good that you barely need to do any drik anymore. You barely need to do any observation. You just can type in something into a computer and be very confident that this is actually the accurate positions of the stars and the planets. But 2 millennia ago, it wasn't so.
I see. Okay.
But basically, that's just an implication of the word Drik Ganita, but really what the word Drik Ganita means is just like careful observation.
Careful observation. Okay. So the question that I wanted to ask regarding this was, so when we study astrology or reading the charts, what exactly are we predicting in terms of individual life occurrence if we're only observing the vastness of time and space? How did they come up with these, well, this planet being here means this?
Right. All right. So actually what he's saying in the sloka is very, very important. So the translation is the vastness of time and space is reflected in the astronomical observations and calculations of Drik Ganita. So you see how what the translator is thinking, you can kind of comprehend observations and calculations. That's what he says, right? So Drik is observations and calculations is Ganita. And it's astronomical because he's talking about astrology, right? Mm-hmm. Now he's trying to say this thing about the vastness of time and space is reflected in these calculations. So that's an important thing to try to understand. Mm-hmm. Yasmin kale yata keta yanti driganita katam. So he's saying this space that I've described to you, previously in the third chapter, the space of the planets and the stars and the rashis.
Mhm.
This space reflects kala, which is time. So what he's saying really here is not that the calculations reflect time and space, but that space reflects time. What do I mean by reflect? I don't mean like light gets reflected off another object, but it means you can understand time by reference to space. It's an important principle that's being explained here in this shloka. For example, how do you understand time at all? Like in your car, if you look in your dashboard in your car, it'll tell you things like revolutions per minute, the RPMs of your engine, or it'll tell you about miles per hour, kilometers per hour. So time and space always has to be joined together to make any sense out of either one. So what he's saying then is by carefully observing space, you'll understand time.
Okay.
Because if you observe space carefully, you're observing movement. What are you talking about when we talk about miles per hour or revolutions per minute? We're talking about movement over time, and that's how you know how things are changing. So if you can carefully observe the sky, then you'll understand how time is moving. Now, what's so important about understanding time? Like, then it comes to your question, which is how then can you predict anything, right? What does this have to do with predictions?
Yes.
Just looking at positions of planets. Well, in Sanskrit, the word kala means time, but it also means doom. Doom.
Okay.
Which is a heavily, it has a lot of connotations in English. But it's a word for destiny that has a lot of negative connotations, right? So it's a good word actually for kala, because kala also.
It's like that guy above.
Yeah. Let me see it. I hope our connection is good. So kala.
Yeah, it's a little choppy.
It's choppy. Maybe it's because my computer's processing some other video. Let me see if I can shut that down.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe this will improve now.
Okay.
All right. So if you can observe space, then you understand time. If you can understand time, then you understand karma. Because kala is karma. The super important thing that you can learn from studying the Puranas, like the Bhagavad Purana, is what is time? So Vidura asked Maitreya Muni, what is time? And Maitreya Muni said, time is nothing on its own. Just like in this shloka, the guy's saying time and space, you can't understand one without the other. So Maitreya answered Vidura, he said, time is nothing by itself. It's not something that exists by itself. But time is just the quality that's inherent in other things that of their ability to change. That's what time is. Time is the ability to change. And so therefore time is the ability for a cause to produce an effect. The time is the most fundamental Shakti because that's what a definition of a Shakti is. It's the ability of the cause to produce an effect. The time is the most fundamental Shakti because it's any action can't produce any result. It can't proceed without time. Even if you've got a grenade and it's not going to explode unless time passes. Even if you have a seed, it's not going to grow unless time passes.
Mm-hmm.
So no cause can produce an effect without the passage of time. In fact, it is time which carries the cause to the effect. So if you understand time, then you understand cause and effect. Because karma is the cause and effect, right? Karma is the relationship of cause to effect. So karma and time are inseparable. Like we have a speedometer that says miles per hour. So we recognize that space and time are inseparable. But but the Vedic point of view also recognizes that karma and time are inseparable. Action and time are inseparable. Action is another kind of movement. So action and time are inseparable. So the relationship between causes and effects is braided with time.
Right.
By understanding time, you'll understand how the causes are leading to effects.
Okay.
Like if you understood that 5 seconds ago somebody hit a ball with a bat, then you know that in 5 seconds from now the ball's going to go over this fence over here 100 yards away.
Okay.
And so by knowing what happened at one point in time, you can know what happened at another point in time.
Okay.
Now still, how does that relate to Saturn and Mercury and stuff like that? Now it's going to become very abstract how such a thing relates. This is all super abstract, isn't it? I could see, like, I'm not quite sure how much I'm holding your attention or
No,
not. Yeah.
no, you got me.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is all very abstract stuff because it's like time, space, action. These are big ideas that people like Einstein work on. So time, space, and action, they're all one. They're not one, but they're inseparable. They're three separate things. Time, space, and action are three separate things, but they're three inseparable things. And so if you can understand one, you need to understand the others. So what astrology does is it says, hey, you can understand time by looking at the sky. And so by looking at the sky, you can understand how actions are going to unfold. That's the basic premise. Now, how does it actually work? It works by symbolism. Every particular moment in time has a symbolism to it based on the locations of planets. Where are they located? Basically based on east and west, north and south. And east, west, north, and south is the basis of all the symbolism in astrology, the most fundamental base, like east being the place where things rise, west being where they set. And then there's an overhead and an underground. Whether you call it north or south gets a little confusing. It's like east and west and up and down are the primary things. So up has a certain symbolism to it. It's visible, it's out in the sky. Down has another symbolism to it. It can't be seen. And so just with that simple starting point of this is symbolic. This is what the various places where the planets can be signify. Then with intuition and a lot of creativity and stuff, you can just like, but it's not like it's off the charts. That's the same thing with language. What do you have in language? You got like 30 sounds that you can possibly make. Or less. There's like 5, maybe 10 sounds, 10 basic consonants and like maybe 10 basic vowels. I think Sanskrit has 13 or something. You know, most languages have like 6, 5. So you got very basic building blocks, but you can make all kinds of words out of them and put the words together. Once you start combining things, you can all of a sudden get millions and millions of interesting combinations and get really specific, even though, like, or colors. If you just start with white, red, yellow, blue, and black, you got everything you need. You're starting with such a basic thing, but you can combine it in so many ways to get so many intricate things. It's the same way with astrology. You basically just have east, west, up, and down. And then these planets that have their certain characters to it. One of them is red, one of them is slow, one of them is sparkly, one of them is steady. You know, Jupiter's steady, Venus is sparkly, Saturn is slow, Mars is red. And Mercury never goes far away from the sun. So that's the basic character of each one of the planets that communicates their basic symbolic nature. And then there's the sun and the moon that both have their obvious, you know, the sun is gigantic, it's bright, it lights up everything, and the moon is beautiful, but it's night shy. It's shy. It only comes out at night, and it changes a lot. So that's your basic palette for the astrological symbolism. So now see, how are these basic symbols configured with each other? It tells you what time it is in a way that lets you know symbolically what's going on.
Okay.
Right. So this sloka from Brhat Parashara Hora Shastra is really so important. It establishes the basic philosophy of astrology. I have a small book called The Beautifully Rational Philosophy of Astrology.
Yes.
It's like 80 pages or something. But it's basically 80 pages all about this sloka, all about this
I
quote
see.
from Brhat Parashara Hora Shastra, where it's like, what's the relationship between space and time and planets and then destiny? And how can
Okay.
you know about destiny? By observing planets.
Okay. I missed that book. I got all of them except that one.
Oh,
Okay. I have to get that one. Okay.
it comes highly recommended by the author.
Yes. Okay. I will read that next.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Should I go to the next one?
Yeah, if you're ready, if you think so.
I'm gonna have to rewatch this section again and think about it a little bit more.
Yeah,
But I do understand generally what you're saying right now.
yes.
Yes.
Or get the book too, like,
Yes.
because it's obviously going to be better than the way I can explain it in 10 minutes.
I will do that. Thank you. So this next question still from chapter 3. Now this is section 9. So let me just read the quote. And it says, and the lagna is similarly determined by knowing the respective time that each of the signs rise. Now I will tell you about the status, trait, and characteristics of the grahas. So he goes on to name them all the way from Sun to Ketu and gives numerous names for each one of them. And I wanted to know, what is the significance of having so many names and stating them? Are these names supposed to tell us something specific, each one of them, or?
Yeah. First thing I'd like to say is, even if you don't know Sanskrit, you can
Yes,
count words, right?
yes.
Everybody can count words. So you can say, there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, in the sloka, how many words are there? There's like 8 words. But
Mm-hmm.
in that list of names of planets, there's got to be what, like 24? Just giving
At
a
least.
ballpark by eye. So you already know that whoever wrote this is not from the original text. They're adding it in,
Okay.
right? So the original text, what the original text says is swasvadeshe pave sadhyam lagnam rashya rashudaya kudam atadhau vit. What's that? That's an interesting one. Vichim. So in other words, this is not even giving any jati rupa. So at the end he says jati rupa guna naham. He says, listen, this verse ends where he says, I will tell you about the status, traits, and characteristics of the grahas. Then this part where you have alternate names for the grahas, and you get a whole list of alternate names for the grahas, that's a commentary.
Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
then your question is, so what the verse is actually saying is, all right, it says, look, in 8 it says you can use careful observation to understand the position of the planets, right? And then in the 9th verse it says you can also use careful observation to understand the lagna.
Yes.
It's more difficult to understand the lagna because you don't see the lagna.
Right.
And the lagna is very difficult because the real reason why the lagna is so difficult to calculate is because it's dependent. It's dependent on your time and your place on Earth.
Okay.
The position of Mars, for example, is not dependent on where you are on Earth. Wherever you are on Earth, Mars is wherever Mars is.
Yes.
And it's the same for everybody. But the lagna is different for everybody depending on their place on Earth, because the lagna is where the eastern horizon is intersecting the zodiac, basically.
Yes.
So that depends on where the east is for you. You know, where's your eastern horizon depends on your place on Earth. So it's difficult to calculate the lagna. It takes more science, more ganita, more calculation. But he says, okay, but you can do it. It can be calculated. And he's going to, or he might not show, but the Siddhantas show how to do it. You know, you have to do it by the position of the sun and the time of sunrise and you can figure out based on how much time has elapsed since the time of sunrise, then you can tell how far the lugna has got to be from the sun, and so you can infer where the lugna is. So that's basically what he says in the first part. He says, look, you can also do careful observation to understand where the ascendant is. And then he says, now that's done. This happens a lot in a book like this, where you think you got it's all neatly broken out into 3.8, 3.9, but a lot of times something changes at 3.8 and a half. So in 3.8 and a half, the whole subject of calculating things is done. And it's in in the second half of 3.9, then he starts to say, look, now there's some other topic, atadao. Now I'm going to tell you some other topic. This other topic is about the jati, rupa, guna of the planets, of the grahas. Okay? Now, your question then is about these names.
Yes. And I asked that because also in chapter 2, I put that quotation too, because he says that all of these incarnations do have less common names. And he reminds us that each name has its own story. Yeah. It's right underneath that section. So I was wondering, is there a significance to them or?
Yeah, well, what's the purpose of a name, actually? The purpose of a name is to give the essential fundamental. It's to give the mind, the purpose of a name is to give the mind a way to grasp an object. That's what the name's purpose is. So what does a name do then? A name has to contain information about the object. There has to be a relationship between the name and the object being named. Otherwise, it's useless, doesn't function as a name. So a name will always have something. I mean, these days we just pick a name for a kid. When a kid is born, we just say, I like the name Lisa, so I'm going to name my daughter Lisa. But in the old days, people would wait a while to see what the child was like, and name it based on that. Or they would consult an astrology. What is this child going to be like? Let's give a name based on what this person is probably going to be like. Or the other thing is you give a name like at birth, but you give another name when the child is 6 because you've known the child for a while. So the kids get a bunch of names. You wind up with a bunch of names. Like people like Arjuna have hundreds of names because they're real famous and so many different people know them in so many different ways. Vishnu Sahasranam, Vishnu has 100 names, at least. And so that's just what happens. I mean, I have like 5 or 6 names I could tell you. Like different people call me different things. Yeah, and my mom calls me something different than my teachers call me, and somebody who knows me from a game that I play will call me a different name than somebody who knows me from the rock band that I was in. And you know what I mean? There's all different names that reveal different things about a person. So if you want to know a person really well, try to learn all their names. So to speak, not literally like you need to know all their names, but think about what a name is. A name is the descriptor of a person. Yes. Or a name is a descriptor of an entity.
Okay. But what I wanted to know here is because there's incarnations in different forms. I'm asking, let's say if someone wants to study this and I'm reading the mythologies and the stories and the different manifestations, will they be able to tell me more or for me to learn more?
You'll learn more. So like, I guess it was about a year ago now, I started to do a series called Astro Sanskrit.
Okay.
On YouTube, but nobody was following it too much. It wasn't getting a lot of likes and a lot of comments, so I stopped doing it. Because, I don't want to waste my time. I want to do YouTube videos for things people want to see on YouTube. But unfortunately, the people who were following it were really into it.
What was it about?
Astro Sanskrit was like, here's the important Sanskrit words that are involved in astrology. And then the track that I got onto was, here's all the names for the sun, all the various Sanskrit names for the sun. And this is what each one means. Then I think I did the sun, moon, Mercury. I think I stopped at Mercury.
Okay.
So you can hunt through the YouTube channel. There's going to be at least 3 or 4 videos in the Astro Sanskrit playlist.
Okay.
That will show you like what does each name show you about the planet. Each name shows you something else. You don't have to learn it that way. Like people have different ways of learning. Somebody might really like to learn through stories. and really like to learn through Sanskrit words, and that would be great for them. You don't have to learn, like for example, one of the Mercury's names
Mm-hmm.
is Indupriya, which means dear to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So that I don't know if we ever do this discussion about how to calculate the friendships between the planets.
Yes.
And how mine is opposite from most people, but that
Mm-hmm.
name of Mercury shows that I got it right.
Mm-hmm.
Mercury is dear to the moon. So you can learn that by learning the Mercury's name, or you could just learn it by learning, like, more practically. Mercury is the intellect and communication. Moon is the emotions. So the emotions like to express themselves. So Mercury is dear to the moon. But the the moon likes to express itself, but the intelligent doesn't like emotions, because emotions confuses the intellect. So it's not a reciprocal relationship between the two. You can just learn it according to your learning style, or the teacher that you have. The teacher might teach you just in a practical way. This planet represents that planet represents that, and that's why they work well together and don't. Other people might learn it through some other cultural way, like, hey, there's this mythology of moon and Mercury. That's why Mercury has this name.
Right. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Should I go to the next one?
If you're ready.
Yes. So this one's from section 11 and 12, both of them. So it's referring to Sun, Saturn, Mars, Moon, Rahu, and Ketu, and it's saying that they're harsh or cruel. The other grahas are gentle, auspicious, and then Buddha, together with harsh grahas, becomes harsh as well. And then in the section 12, it says the Lord of the sky, Sun, is all Atma, which is the mind, and Kuja is Sattva. Buddha is spoken of as the clever giver of language. And my question was, in chapter 1, he says, he briefly explains the nature of existence, which is brought forth by the 3 qualities of the gunas emanating from Vishnu, we talked about last time. Yeah. I wanted to know if the gunas as a mode of being are related to this cruelty and toughness of graha's nature, or their benefic nature, or is it something else that determines this nature of them as being hard or soft? That was a long question.
Let's look at the actual shlokas first.
Okay.
And then let's hear your question again after we get what these slokas are actually saying.
Yes.
So he's got some names for the planets. So in 11, he's going to give you the classic. This is the classic way of starting a description of planets, is to group them into 2 factions.
Okay. Yes.
But what you should know about this is it's not unanimous. Which planets are in which factions. The 2 factions are going to be what we nowadays call Malefic and Benefic.
Okay.
Right? So, but you should know, it should just be clear up front that it's not unanimous about which planets are Malefic and Benefic.
Okay.
Different astrologers have different opinions since the beginning. But if you do a careful study, an inclusive study, you'll see that everybody agrees that Saturn and Mars are Malefic. And everybody agrees that Jupiter and Venus are benefic.
Okay.
So let's just hold on to the other ones for a second. The rest of the planets, let's just put them on pause for a second, and let's just keep in mind that definitely Saturn and Mars are malefic, and Jupiter and Venus are benefic.
Yes.
Now, what does it mean, malefic and benefic? Because in Latin, the words have a definite meaning that everybody instinctually, every English speaker instinctually knows. Malefic means bad,
Mm-hmm.
and benefic means good. Bene means good, and male means bad, good and evil, or detrimental and beneficial. Right? That's like, so that's weird. And this is the thing about Western astrology, is it doesn't get preserved in its original language. The great thing about Indian astrology is that it got preserved in its original language. It's still in Sanskrit. Right now we're looking at the Sanskrit. That's the Sanskrit that was written 1,500 years ago, or whenever this thing was written. But in Western astrology, the ideas originate in like Babylonian languages and Greek languages, Egyptian languages, and then they get suppressed by the cultural climate because of the religious cultural climate in that zone of the world was antagonistic with astrology, suppressed the information, but then it resurged, and it did that like 2 or 3 times. Astrology was repressed and then had a resurgence, I think 2 or 3 times historically. But each time it would have a resurgence, it would be over a gap of time. And then it would be into a new cultural milieu, speaking a new language. So the Western tradition gets translated a couple of times, whereas the Eastern astrological tradition is just there. It's still the same one. It's the Sanskrit. All the source material is still there. That's the great thing about Vedic astrology. One of the great things. So you get a word like benefic or malefic. It's like it's distorted by through like 2 or 3 different translations. Sanskrit is just saying it's calling the benefics somya, and it's calling the malefics krura. So here he's in your translation here, he's saying cruel or harsh,
Yes.
right? So krura, it sounds like it's cognate to the English word cruel, krura. So krura planets are cruel, but even the translator knows it's not exactly cruel. He's going to try to tell you something that it's not exactly cruel, because cruel also means like mean, right?
Yes.
But the planets are not mean. Like you noted, the whole thing is from Vishnu.
Mm-hmm.
So why would any of these planets be mean? Vishnu's not mean.
Right.
So it's not cruel, really, is not a good translation of krura here, even though it's cognate. So the guy's saying harsh, that's closer. So really, some of these planets are harsh, but harsh is not really even hitting the nail on the head. What you want to say really is some of these planets are strict. Strict is a really good word for malefic. Mars and Saturn are very strict and male. You know, they're very male. They have a male nature to them that's very strict, and they have they're not forgiving, but they're not weak either.
Mm-hmm.
They're very strong. They're disciplined, but they're not gentle and kind. Whereas the other planets like Jupiter and especially Venus, they're very fluffy, soft, gentle, forgiving, generous. So that's what benefic really means. Benefic really means like easygoing, forgiving, generous. And malefic means disciplining, punishing. You did something wrong, the malefic guy will punish you. The benefic guy will forgive you.
I see. Okay.
So that's why it's got like benefic and malefic, you know. But really it's just like strict and gentle.
Okay.
So some of the planets are strict, and that implies that they're very strong also. They're muscly. They have muscle. Saturn, Mars, man, these guys can work. Venus, Jupiter, they're not workers. They're thinkers.
Right.
They like to think, they're creative. They like to discuss, talk. Saturn, Mars, they don't discuss, talk. They get things done.
Two.
Yeah. So they're totally opposite. They're very, very opposite planets. That's why classically the first thing that you learn about the planets is what's the group. There's this one group that's this way, that like Saturn and Mars, and there's this other group that's like Venus and Jupiter. Now as for the other planets,
Yes.
here, this sloka that's included in Brhat Parashara Hora Shastra is saying the sun is also strict.
Yes.
Most people also accept that. Most people agree. I think that Hellenistic astrology didn't even bother to talk about the other guys. They just said Saturn and Mars are the strict ones. Venus and Jupiter are the gentle ones. The other guys are neither gentle nor strict.
Okay.
But, you know, let's fit these, then the rest of the, you know, other astrologers said, let's fit these guys in. So the sun is strict. That's because the sun is a fatherly, authoritative figure. So fathers and authority figures are going to be strict and strong. So yeah, it makes sense. But the nice thing about a book called Paladipika
Mhm.
Paladipika gave a very rational version of this splitting of the planets into two camps. It says there's a spectrum of beneficence and maleficence. There's a spectrum of strictness. Not every strict planet is equally strict, and not every generous planet is equally generous. So the author of Paladipika, Mantreshwar, he had this great way of resolving the discrepancies of various opinions about which planet is strict and which is generous. He said Mars is the most strict,
More than Saturn.
more than Saturn,
Okay.
because it's a little bit cruel too. Like, strict also means like punishing.
Okay.
So Mars is like really interested in punishing. Saturn is a little bit like, it's wrong, but I don't care. It's your problem. Saturn will be like, it's your problem. Mars is like, I'm gonna make you fix that. Mars will get on your case and try to inspire you or something.
Okay.
Fix this, changes. Saturn is like, it's your problem, not my problem. You're totally wrong, but that's your fault. So actually Mars works out to be a little bit more intense in the strictness spectrum than Saturn does. And then he says the sun is also strict, but the least of the three.
I see.
Similarly, for the benefics, he says Venus is the most generous, the most forgiving, the most, just forgiving and generous. Jupiter is a little less, because Jupiter doesn't like, if you did something wrong, Jupiter doesn't like to reward you for it. Whereas Venus just wants to reward everybody, make everybody feel good. Jupiter has this like moral thing.
Mm-hmm.
So he withholds benefits. He withholds blessings from the immoral. So he's a little less generous than Venus. And then he says Mercury also belongs in this group
Of the benefics.
of the benefics, but the least so.
The least so. Okay.
It's more like mid spectrum. Like a right wing, left wing,
Mm-hmm.
extreme right, extreme left, and kind of like center. So Mercury is just a little bit to the soft side, and Sun is a little bit to the hard side. And much further out from Mercury and the Sun are Saturn on the hard side and Jupiter on the soft side. And then a little bit further still is Mars is the hardest and Venus is the softest.
Okay.
So hard, soft, strict, gentle. That's really what we're talking about with Malefic, Benefic. Paladipika, Mantreshwar says now you still leaves 3 planets left over.
Mm-hmm.
We still got Rahu, Ketu, and the moon.
Yeah.
So he says those guys are neutral. Well, what he means by neutral, though, is that they will be affected. You can't say for certain whether they're going to be malefic or benefic. It's case sensitive. It's instance sensitive, whether the moon is malefic or benefic or Rahu Ketu, which is this in this sloka that you pointed out. That's the way the author is treating Mercury and the moon. The Mercury is treating Mercury and the moon as being
sway.
Yeah. What would you say it if it's like not inherent? Incidentally malefic or benefic. So the author says, if the moon is waning, then it's malefic. So under some circumstances, the moon is going to, but you can imagine these guys are mostly in the middle. The moon is mostly in the middle. So even if it goes towards the malefic side, it's not going to go all the way to be like Mars. It's just going to push a little bit more towards being like the sun. Or if it goes to the benefic side, it's not going to come and be a Venus. It's going to come and push more towards being like Mercury.
Right.
Yeah. But in this book, the guy says Mercury behaves like that as well. But what Mantreshwar says is, instead of Mercury, he says Rahu and Ketu depend on their association.
Okay.
If Rahu and Ketu get associated with malefic planets, then they become malefic. If they associate with benefic planets, then they become benefic.
Okay. With Mercury, is it that quality of it to mimic, and then moon being that receptive perception, so it's picking up the feeling and acting?
That's his idea. But Mantreshwar and Paladipika is even more so. This sloka has left out Rahu Ketu, right?
No, it's there. And
Oh,
the
he
second.
says, look at this sloka. This is one reason why I don't like it, actually.
Okay.
He's just saying that, like, everybody is cruel.
That was one of my questions on the bottom.
He's just saying everybody's cruel. And then I've seen people justify this and say life is cruel. But life is not cruel. Life is actually completely fair. Like, you don't understand Vedanta if you think that life is cruel. Life is absolutely 100% fair. That's the cruel part of it. I mean, it's not forgiving. That's what cruel means. Cruel doesn't mean evil. Cruel just means you're held to it. You did this, you gotta pay for that. So that's why it seems cruel, because there's no forgiveness. Like, everybody loves Jesus Christ and you're forgiven for your sins and all that stuff. But there's no forgiveness.
Yes.
When it all comes down to it, there's malefics and there's benefics, and one guy's going to forgive you and one guy's not going to forgive you. So it's all equals zero.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is absolutely fair. So the idea that there's tons of malefic planets doesn't make any sense to me. That's why I don't side with those depictions of the planets that depict lots of malefics. That's why Mantreshwar's Paladipika seems so perfect to me, because it's absolutely 100% balanced.
Okay.
He says you got Saturn on one, you got Venus on one side, super generous, and counterbalancing it is Mars, super strict. And then you got Jupiter, which is very generous, but counterbalancing it is Saturn, which is pretty strict, very strict. And then you got Mercury, which is pretty easygoing, nice, but counterbalancing it, which is the Sun, which is kind of a little bit more strict.
Yes.
And then you got these three guys in the middle, and they can go either way, depending. So everything is perfectly balanced in his view. So he seems to have gotten it right. So I follow that view. Also, it makes no sense that Rahu and Ketu should be fixed. So you picked up on the idea that Mercury mimics, right?
Yes.
But nobody mimics more than Rahu and Ketu.
That's true.
Rahu and Ketu are doppelgangers. That's what they are in their mythological form, is they're doppelgangers. Mercury's not a doppelganger. He's just very, very diplomatic. So he can switch his role. But Rahu Ketu literally are doppelgangers. They're shapeshifters. They change. They're polymorphers. So they're really the ones that are in that Mercury spot. What this author is saying is Mercury spot is really Rahu Ketu's position. It depends on how they're affected.
Yes. Okay.
So does that address the questions? You got any more questions on this?
Yeah, the question, I wanted to know what it is about their own actual nature, because I was wanting to know in reference to the gunas, what is it that makes something strict? Or because later on it goes on to talk about how, what section is it? Yeah, it's in the same section, talks about Kuja being sattva.
Yeah,
So,
that's interesting.
So to me, it seems like it would be more rajas. And then, so I just wanted to know, how are we getting to these qualities of the planets?
Yeah. So now he says, in the end of the verse, he said, it was the end of the previous verse, number 9. He said he's going to tell you about their jati, rupa, and guna. So those are the 3 things he said he's going to tell you about. Then in 11, he starts telling you about their jati, rupa, and guna. So by telling you about their maleficness or beneficness, he's telling you about their jati. Jati means your class.
Okay.
So he classifies them as being either Krura or Somya. Right? So that he's told you about that. Now he's going to have to tell you about the Rupa and the Guna.
Yes.
Rupa means the form or the way something looks. Okay. And Guna means the assets that it has or the qualities that it has.
Okay.
It doesn't mean Rajas, Tamas, Sattva.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. Although those 3 things are called the gunas of Prakriti. Those are the qualities of Prakriti or matter, the world. The world has 3 qualities, 3 fundamental qualities to it, which is solidity, energy, and ability to be perceived. Sattva is the ability to perceive. Rajas is the energy to do
Mhm.
things, and tamas is the solidity, the actual stuff that you do things with. So you can perceive the stuff and you can do things with the stuff. Those are the three qualities of stuff.
Right. Okay.
So we all, that's if you just are starting to learn Sanskrit, then when you hear guna, you think it must mean Prakriti's triguna.
Yeah,
But
that's what I was thinking.
that's what happens in every language is you always have noun adjective pairs, but after usage, the most common usage of the noun adjective pair, the adjective just gets dropped.
Okay.
Like card. So card actually just means like a flat surface. Or like board. Let's say board. I was thinking of cardboard. Board means like a flat surface, but one of the types is a cardboard, and another one is a wooden board, and another one is maybe a motherboard or something, for a computer. So
And
the
then
most
being
common one is just wood board.
yes.
So when you say wood board, you don't have to say wood board, you just say board. So that happens all the time in every language. So now in Sanskrit with guna, we don't have to say Prakriti's guna. We just say guna, and that's what we're usually talking about, Prakriti's guna. But you just have to be careful. Not every time that the word guna is used, that might not be the case. Might not be what the person means when they're saying the word guna. They might have another adjective on the guna. So here he's talking about the planet's guna. He's going to tell you about the gunas of the planets.
Okay.
So, like you'll talk about the gunas of a mate, for example. If you're interested in finding a mate, you'll look at the guna of the mate. Doesn't mean you're analyzing the rajas, tamas, sattva. You want to look at how intelligent are they? How beautiful are they? How much money do they make? Those are their gunas. So you follow. Find. So that's what he's talking about when he says he's going to tell you the gunas of the planets. He's going to tell you their qualities. And he tells you their rupa, he's going to tell you the way that they look. You still with me?
As in Mars being red?
Yeah, but as
yes,
in
I'm with you, yes.
well, let's see what he actually says. But I think he's going to be like, this is the kind of visual effect that it produces. Mars will produce a muscular, short, lean person.
Yes, he does about that.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So he's probably going to, that's what he probably means by saying he's going to describe the rupa of the planets.
I see, okay.
So then he goes on where he says, in 11, he describes the jatis. Then he's going to start talking about their gunas. He says, the Lord of the sky is all Atma. So he says, Sarvatma cha divan te mana. And then he goes to Buddha, to Mercury. So he's saying, Sarvatma cha. So this is a lousy translation, unfortunately. Most of this translation is not so bad, but this one here, the Lord of the sky is all Atma. It hasn't really explained to a person that's not familiar with the word Atma what the sun is. What's the primary characteristic guna of the sun? Is that it's the unique identifying nature of anything. That's what Sarvatma means. Atma means a unique identifier. It doesn't mean soul. It's just that the soul is the unique identifier for any individual. We can use the word Atma to mean soul.
Yes.
But it's just because the soul is the fundamental unique identifier.
Right.
When consciousness can be uniquely identified, it's called Atma. When consciousness can't be uniquely identified, it's called Brahman. If consciousness doesn't do anything, then it's just Brahman. But if consciousness is actually real and perceiving, then it's Atma.
Okay.
It has a specificity to it. So Atma actually means specificity. The uniqueness, the unique specificity of a thing is its Atma.
Okay.
Sarvatma. So the sun is like the core essential thing of anything. That's what the verse is saying is the primary guna of the sun.
Okay.
So so that's really what the sun is. When the guy, now I'm not sure if he's going to do it in Parashara Hora Shastra, I can't remember, but in most books they go on this long, like seems like a tangent to us, but probably to the audience at the time it was very relevant. They go on like a long tangent of describing the kind of plants that the sun symbolizes, the kind of trees, the kind of ants, the kind of everything, the purpose of doing that is so that the student can see the common thread throughout all these various things. So these days we'll do it with like in The Walking Dead, which guy is really Sagittarius, or in this TV show, who's the sun really signify? So then if you follow that, if somebody's giving you a really good description of that and you follow it, you'll see like, oh, in The Walking Dead, the sun was this guy, Rick. And in this other TV show, the sun was this other guy who was like the main character.
Yes.
So I get the nature of the sun, then the sun is like, it's the main central character. And then that makes sense with the symbolism of what the sun is. It's the main light in the sky, right? So that's what that's what Sarvatma means. The sun is the main core essential thing.
Okay.
Everything, and you have to be patient and intelligent, but you can just take that bit of information and expand everything about the sun about it. It's the main core thing. So everything depends on it. Everything's reliant on it. It's the authority. It's the governor, etc. You get all the meanings of the sun from that one primary guna of it. Now, sattva, but it seems like okay. He mentions, after the sun, he mentions Kumud Bandhava is the mind. Kumud Bandhava means the friend of the lotus. The friend of the lotus is the mind, is the manas. It's also not a very useful translation. But maybe if there's a nice commentary, it would be good enough.
Okay.
Friend of the lotus. Why is the moon called the friend of the lotus? Because most of the really beautiful lotuses, they bloom only in the moonlight.
Okay.
The less beautiful lotuses bloom during the day for the sun, but the really, really stellar, outstanding lotus flowers, they stay closed during the day. Then they bloom in the moonlight. And then to see the lotus flower, because also lotus flower will be on the water, so to see the lotus flower under the moonlight with the moon shimmering off the water it's like
Stunning.
Yeah, it's stunning. So the moon has this famous name of being the friend of the lotus flowers. Why is the guy calling the moon the friend of the lotus flower? It's not just picking it out for no reason. It has an application to what he's trying to convey. Why is the author saying, why doesn't he call the moon something else, like Chandra, a more common name? Because the moon's nature is all of the desire. Like, what do you think? If you imagine a lotus flower blooming on a moonlit lake with the moon rising, you feel like, oh, romantic, and that's what the mind is like. It's a place where there's great hopes and a feeling of romance and the blossoming of things, like things are increasing in the mind and desires are it's accentuating the moon, the mind. But the moon is the manas. But what is the manas? The manas is like Kumud Bandhava. It's like the friend of beautiful things. It loves beautiful things. It wants beauty. It has desires. It's romantic. It's sensual. So the moon's core nature is like that. Then it's interested in beauty. It wants to experience something nice. The sun is the core of the entity, which is just the consciousness. But the moon is the consciousness wanting to experience something nice. That's what manas is. And again, then the author here is just writing for people that already have studied Sankhya Yoga and they know what manas is. So they already know that manas is based on your opinions, giving you desires, giving you emotions.
Yes. Okay.
So the moon really symbolizes all that stuff. Your subjective viewpoint on the world, which gives you an opinion, and that gives you a desire. If you think, my subjective viewpoint is I see this beautiful flower. My opinion is that's a beautiful flower. And my desire is I want it. I want to be here. I want to look at it. I want to smell it. I don't want to leave. I don't want it to die or whatever, right? So you get all these desires based on your opinions. And then whether or not you can accomplish your desires is the basis of whether or not you feel happy or sad. Which incidentally is how games work. Why are games fun to play? Because it just gives you little tiny desires that are so easy to satisfy. I just want to get my piece to this square. And then the feeling of getting the right dice roll that lets you get your piece of that square gives you happiness. because that's what happiness is. Just it's the fulfilling of desire. So games are really simple. They just give you a desire that you can fulfill real easy.
Okay.
Like a video game will say, here's level 50, and here's the way to get to level 50. You can do it, and then you do it, and you feel great.
Right. So isn't the moon the emotions though, or is it just the moon is appealing to the emotion?
Now the moon is the seat. The moon is the experiencer of emotions. So what happens if you feel your desire? Emotions can't be separated from desires. Like we talked about space and time and activity, they can't be separated. They're three separate things, but they can't be separated. So in the same way, you can't separate opinions from desires, and you can't separate desires from emotions. You can't separate them because emotions are just based on your desires. You feel some version of happiness or sadness based on whether or not you succeed or fail in fulfilling the desire. That's all that emotions are. So the moon has got all these things in it. It's got the desirable object, the lotus flower.
Yes.
But it's also got the love of it, the bandhava, the bond to it, which is the emotion. So it's got the desire and the emotions. That's what's in the manas.
Okay. And the opinion is just a mere assessment of it. I like it or I
The
don't.
opinion is like the root of the whole thing. Yeah.
The
This one is good. And that the moon is always very binary like this too. So the root of all the binaryism is that's good, that's bad. I like this, I don't like that. And that's just coming because it's subjective. Like the consciousness, the sun is like this conscious core, and then as it looks out to the world, it's now got its subjectivity gets activated. And the moon, the mind is what facilitates all that subjectivity.
Yes. Okay. And how much of that subjectivity is related to the sun? Because in the commentary it says the moon is mind. The moon reflects the light of the sun in the same way that the mind reflects the light of consciousness. So
Whose
those
commentary is that?
same one.
Oh, that's great. That's such a good commentary. I would write exactly the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. How much of the subjectivity is the moon and how much is the sun? Well, how much of the moonlight is the moon and how much is the sun? Same thing.
Okay.
It's actually none of the stuff would work if it wasn't for the sun. So like you might have we have a body, we have senses, we have organs, we have a mind, we have a brain, we have chemical neurons, but none of it would work if there wasn't the sun powering it with consciousness. That's why you die. It's all still there, but it ceases to work because the energy source gets removed from it.
Right.
When the energy source gets removed from all the apparatus just reverts back into molecules. It stops functioning and it reverts back to its original state. So it's the sun's power is holding everything in place and using everything. So all of everything is coming out of consciousness, all the opinions, all the emotions and everything. But it's using these tools to explore it more fully. Like an artist uses a brush to paint, but the idea is in the artist. But he couldn't do it without the brush. So all the core things are in the consciousness, but the consciousness manifests these tools like mind and senses and things like that to be able to express what it has inside it.
That's beautiful. Okay. Yes, thank you.
All right, so then we didn't really get to talk about sattva.
No.
Right, and this is really interesting. Why is it that kujam is sattva? And it's literally, it says sattvam kujo. Right, so it's definitely exactly from the translation. But you want to start up with this next week?
If that works for you.
Yeah, I love it.
Yes. Yeah, me too.
And let me research it a little bit too. Like what?
Okay.
Because it's mystifying. Because definitely kuja is not sattva guna.
Doesn't seem like.
But just to give you a preview of what the answer is basically going to be like, sattva doesn't always mean sattva guna. And the reason why sattva guna is called sattva guna is because sat means real. Sat means real. Sat asat, real unreal. Sattva means realness. So Mars is practical.
Very, yes.
So that's basically what he's saying there in a weird way. And people would easily get way off rail with this, try and invent and figure out ways that Mars could actually really be sattvic or something, or Mars is giving you more cognition or comprehension. But really, Sat just means real. Sattva means realness. Mars is pragmatic.
Right. Okay. But we can start with this next week and
Let's
talk
follow it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Parisa.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Yes. Bye.
Bye-bye.